Hello and welcome back to Apolitical, a podcast from Atlanta, Dakota. We have another special episode today. This time we're sitting down with 2020 candidate for Fulton County Sheriff, Patrick Labat. Mr. Labat came in second place in the primary election in June, which has gotten him to a runoff with the first place finisher and current Fulton County Sheriff, Ted Jackson. Labat began his long 30-year career in public safety as a detention officer at the Atlanta City Jail, working the overnight shift while getting his undergrad degree at Clark Atlanta. Labat went on to work his way all the way up the corrections ladder, eventually becoming chief of the Atlanta Department of Corrections in 2010. One of his responsibilities as chief was serving as CEO of the Atlanta City Jail, which he ran pretty much seamlessly for 9 years up until his retirement this past December. Now, Labat has his sights set on a bigger office, Fulton County Sheriff. We talked to him about the mayor's decision to close the Atlanta City Jail and how he thinks it should be repurposed, tensions between the community and the police, and of course, why we should vote for him over Sheriff Ted Jackson on August 11th. So without further ado, please enjoy our interview with Chief Patrick Labat. Thank you so much, Mr. Labat, for coming on the show. I want to start out by asking you about your PAT 3 program. It's an award-winning program that you founded as the Atlanta Corrections Chief. Can you tell our listeners about the program and how it has impacted the city?
One of the things that I found early on being chief, especially of a correctional institute, is that, or an institution, is that oftentimes we put people to work, but we don't pay them what they're worth. And so we had an opportunity, just sitting in cabinet meeting and listening to other departments talk about their vacancies. Watershed talks about the vacancies. Public Works talk about the vacancies. And so we partnered with the State Department of Corrections, as well as Nancy Flakes Johnson over at Urban League of Greater Atlanta. And we wanted to create an environment where, when we were told we couldn't do it, when anyone that had time left, anywhere from 12 to 15 months left on their sentence in a state departmental or Department of Corrections facility, could be a part of a program that not only really was allowed to train individuals that are coming out of incarceration, but allowed to give them a job. Wow. And so the difference here is many of the transitional centers in the state take in individuals, give them certain classes that they need, but then they send them out amongst the community to try and find a job. Well, we had the jobs. And so we literally embarked on a journey to change people's lives. So instead of $25 in a bus ticket when they got out, these individuals were making the same thing the lowest paid persons in the city were making. So, as you know, the mayor did a wonderful job of increasing minimum wage. So last year it was $14 an hour, this year it's $15 an hour, and next year it'll be $16 an hour. Wow. And so we began a program that allowed people to really start changing their lives. Don't leave with $25 in a bus ticket, you leave with $20, $30, $40,000 in the bank, depends on how long you have on your sentence and how long you stay with us. Nice. And so, more importantly, you leave with a sense of dignity.
Amazing. I want to move on to the Fulton County Jail. As sheriff, one of your duties would be running the jail, which, as I'm sure you're well aware of, is facing a host of issues concerning overcrowding. It's being reported that hundreds of inmates are having to sleep on mattresses on the floor. There are health concerns. If elected, what would be your plan to fix this?
Well, the first thing is, less than 3 miles away. You hear me constantly say that because the city jail in and of itself, as built prior to the Olympics and occupied, it literally puts us in a space that the relief valve is right there. We can get immediate relief right there. You'll hear the current administration talking about it not being a real jail, right? Which is absolutely insulting more than anything else, because they're real officers. It's a real jail. We've housed DeKalb County inmates. We've housed federal inmates. And truth be told, when I was a major, we housed Fulton County inmates. They just didn't, at the time, the administration didn't want to pay what it cost. Well, that's the first thing we have to do, and this is what I'm big on when it comes to literally collaborative relationships, is day one, after I'm sworn in. When I'm sworn in, I got to take my wife out. I make no bones about it. We'll take day one and kind of breathe for a second.
Got to make sure home is right.
That's right. And day two, we'll be having conversations, certainly if the mayor's available, her team's available, about how we can create this relief valve. And then at that point, move forward with what next looks like.
Do you think the city jail should be sold to Fulton County, or do you think that's something that needs to be talked through, worked out?
It does have to be worked out,
Yeah.
but I think the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
So if I presented a plan that will allow for that to happen while taking the multi-million-dollar a year burden off of the city. And yes, the county has to absorb the operational costs therein, but the jail's been paid for both by Fulton County tax dollars and City of Atlanta tax dollars back 20 years ago. The building itself is 478,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. And since we helped push forward the sign your own bond legislation, right, that part of criminal justice reform for misdemeanors, we were averaging anywhere from 70 to 160 inmates a night, right? It just depends on the weekend, depends on what's going on. But we certainly didn't need 1,300 beds. And so there's an opportunity for us to, for a minimal fee, create an environment where the mayor can get out of, or the city can get out of the jail business. Mm-hmm. As a county, we can do what we are constitutionally responsible for, making that a part of the jail. And there'll be people that are disappointed with the ATL closed down the jail movement, the task force, and I certainly get that. There's a lot of work going into that, but does not mean we can't even create a mixed use area that will allow for minimum or minor offenses to be housed there and then quickly adjudicated. So the opportunities there, and that's why I liked being on the task force, because I believe you got to have a seat at the table. And when you have a seat at the table, you can continue to communicate and have conversations about what we together can do better.
Okay, so we're going to interrupt this interview for a brief moment because recently Chief Labat sat down with Revolt TV to discuss the shooting of Rayshard Brooks. So we wanted to make sure you guys heard his take on that. So let's take a listen.
So I'm joined by Chief Patrick Labat. He's running for Fulton County Sheriff. Chief Labat, thank you so much for joining us, brother. It seems as if that most officers show up in communities with a posture like very much of warrior. They're there to strictly enforce the law. And it creates a situation where, we saw what happened just in Atlanta not long ago with the brother in the Wendy's parking lot. What should have been a DUI turned into a homicide, or at least the killing of this young brother. So when people see that, Chief Labat, what can you tell them? What are some tangible steps in terms of de-escalation, in terms of bringing, I know there's lots of conversation when we talked about defunding the police, right? We're talking about reallocating funds and putting some of that money to either mental health experts that can accompany officers perhaps to some of these non-violent calls or things of this nature. There's a lot of stuff in the air. Tell me from your experience, Chief, what do you think could work practically? Because how it's going now, we know this isn't working.
Well, first of all, thank you. And thank you for having me. I agree. I think the first thing, two things that we have to do on the front of this. And that is, the first is we have to change our mentality from a law enforcement perspective, which includes how do we help you in this situation? Mm-hmm. And so when we move toward, like, as you said, the DUI was evident in this case, but how do we get you home safely? How do we put the arrest portion on the back burner? Right? Mm-hmm. We will never arrest our way out of our problems. And so if we inject that in an early training setting, that our goal is customer service, mm-hmm. then we change the dynamic of the conversation. And then the second is we have to do a better job of taking care of ourselves. And what I mean is, in 30 years of law enforcement, I had one mental health evaluation, one psychological exam, and that was when I first started. So I am proposing that we do that at least twice a year. Right? There's a lot to unpack. You become, you see this and you become desensitized on a daily basis. But if you're able to unpack that, then I think we better serve our community. I think it's a bit too dangerous to clean the slate and just start. I think we clean leadership. right? Everything starts with leadership. We see that on a national basis, and it becomes and drills down to a local opportunity for us. And that's part of really, to be honest, why I'm running.
So last question. This is obviously a very tight contest between you and Sheriff Jackson, who has held the position since 2009. You lost to him in 2008. What makes you the better candidate today?
So there are a couple things, right? And it's not about being better, good, better, or best. It's about being the right person at the right time. It's about leadership. For me, there are three tenets of where we have to focus as a sheriff's office. We have to focus on crime and public safety. We have to focus on jail conditions. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous that a federal judge, even after having come out of years of being under a consent decree, a federal judge is still saying one of your facilities is absolutely repulsive. You have a black female that hadn't had a shower in a month. That is absolutely absurd. And that's why I say constantly, leadership matters. Having run the city facility, the city jail for the last 9 years, with a perfect Fulton County health score of 100, the American Correctional Association accreditation with a perfect 100 over 3 cycles, which is 9 years, it's unheard of. And the last thing we have to look at is our recidivism rate. We talked about the PAT 3 program and how beneficial it is. Can you imagine if we do that on a much larger scale? And then the other piece of that is we can't arrest our way out of this. We have to, and we started this at the city jail. We created a junior correction officer program like no other. It's not a scared straight program. Let me be clear. I've seen the embarrassing looks on TV, whether it be 60 Days In or whether it be Beyond Scared Straight. We have a responsibility as our communities change. We need leadership that's active, engaged, transparent, accountable. Really, and we need to bring back the trust that law enforcement had years ago with our community. We have to rebuild that trust, and we have to focus on that. And that's what makes me different. Literally, an executive level CEO that's ready right now. We don't have to worry about day one. The experience to have done it. We have to change the culture and focus on customer service. And those things matter. And when we can make that happen, we will begin, along with the training component, to have the #1 sheriff's office in the country. They're really good men and women at the sheriff's office. Let me be absolutely clear. They're starving for leadership, and we need to make that a reality.